Good afternoon. I hope you all have a good start of the week. So I following Clivia's last week's topic on Latino culture. Today I'll be doing another culture talk on Chinese culture. So this presentation is supported by HRSA and also CN, which is funded by the New York State Department of Health. I don't have any conflict of interests. So our clinic is following the 4Ms model. We go over what matters, medication and mentation mobility to with all patients that we see at the clinic. So I hope after today's presentation, you have a better understanding of the Chinese culture and how the values and the ideas affect their perception to receive care. And lastly, there are some suggestions for healthcare providers when seeing Chinese patients. So I'll start with the language and ethnic groups, and then the religion and beliefs. We'll go over culture and society, and last will be the social custom and etiquette. So language, Mandarin is the official language in Chinese culture. However, there are more than 80 languages and dialects used in the country. Seven most commonly used dialects in Chinese culture are Mandarin, Cantonese, Wu, which is primarily used in Shanghai. There's Fuganese, usually it's also called as Fujianese and Taiwanese. And people from like Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, they also speak the language. And there's also Shang dialects, Hakka, and Gan. And you probably know that Mandarin and Cantonese are mostly commonly seen in the clinic. There are the ones that early immigrated to the US. So Cantonese, usually people from Hong Kong, Macau, or southern part of China. There are the earlier immigrants who came to the US. So a lot of the language needs that I have seen are usually Mandarin and Cantonese in the US. There are 56 ethnic groups in China, and Han, which is one of the ethnic group, accounted for 92% of the populations. And according to the US Census Bureau reported, Chinese, there are 2.9 million Chinese in US in 2015, and I'm assuming the numbers will be more after last year's consensus. But New York hosts the largest population of ethnic Chinese outside of Asia, which is also surprising to me because I thought California would be the largest, but New York actually is the largest city that hosts the population. Religion beliefs, three traditional Chinese religion are Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. And these three are considered as the pillar of the ancient Chinese society, as well as in the current modern times. And as the philosophies and religions, they're not only influencing the spirituality, but also influence the government, the science, the arts, the social structure. So instead of having one traditional religion taking over the other, these three philosophies have influenced society alongside with each other and blended together at times. And for Confucianism, is more closer to philosophy than the true religion. It is a system of behaviors and ethics that stress the obligation of people towards one another based upon their relationship. And it's a guidance of life that continues to influence Chinese culture and as well as in East Asian culture, like in Japan and in Korea. And the founder of this philosophy focused mainly on humanism, meaning that how you treat people, treating others the way you want to be treated. Believe that if everyone fulfill their role and obligation and responsibility with respect and kindness towards each other, it will build a stronger state. And he puts a emphasis on interaction between family members and how the family members and the public sphere interacts, and how the states should be governed. So it's they don't really, Confucianism doesn't really focusing on the spiritual concerns like afterlife. Taoism is actually mainly concerned with spiritual elements of life. It focuses more on the longevity of like the human body and soul, and they tend to achieve the spiritual immortality through becoming one with nature, and it's an important part of this religion. And the guiding principle for Taoism is finding harmonious natural order and between humans and the world. And for Buddhism, it's also quite different. They achieve enlightenment through meditation and spiritual learning and practice. They believe in reincarnation, that life is impermanent and full of suffering and uncertainty. And in order to achieve and find peace, you have to go through this suffering in order to find the peace. So in Taiwan, which I'm from, the religion sets a clock for living. We basically go by like the religion takes regulates the holiday, determines how the business run, the families run. So there are four main religions in Taiwan. Like there's like Buddhism, Taoism, Christianity, and Yiguan Dao. So people in Taiwan basically have a mix and match religion according to their needs. So every month on the first day and the 15th day of the month on the lunar calendar, we do have a bye-bye ceremony, which is like you will burn like a paper money in which is in the picture you'll see in a yellow color. And you can also find it in Asian markets. You will see that some of them are selling this paper money. So you will buy them and you will burn them in this like big metal barrel. So it can be bye-bye is like a paying respect and worship and visiting and saluting. So usually you will be praying with both hands, like bowing with both hands. And you also do it to your ancestors. So although we do it regularly twice a month, they also do it throughout the year. There are different types of holidays and religious practice that we do this sort of practice. In fact, yesterday, which is the 7th month of lunar calendar, and we call it a ghost month. And this is one of the special times that we also do this sort of practice. So in our folk religion, we believe that there's a strong connection between the life of Earth and the afterlife. So it's important it's also part of the duty of the son and the children to care for their ancestor after they passed away. So during this month, you're supposed to like buy food or buy fruits, and then you burn the paper monies. And during this month, you're supposed to give like abundance of offering to satisfy not only your own ancestor, but also the hungry ghost that haven't been cared throughout the year. And by offering that, we believe that we are protected from being haunted by this ghost. And it's actually not every people in Taiwan, every Taiwanese person will believe this 100%, but many people still do it. The mentality is that you would rather do it than not doing it. And so they would rather to have this ceremony than having themselves feeling that they're being haunted, or they will have miserable lives. So they're still doing these practices. And during this ghost month, people don't get married. They won't married, or they won't move into their new home. They won't have any like official transaction, like if they are buying a new car or anything that's important in their lives, they won't do it during this month. So we basically have all kinds of gods. We have gods for health, for marriage, for wisdom, for career, and people go to temple for very specific things. And usually in return, you will donate money, or you will give up your favorite things for a period of time, or giving out food or meat a period of time as a way to thank God. And actually when I go back home, this is part of the routine. My parents, they will take me to one of the temples and pray and thank for the past year having a safe and healthy year. So it's very important for us to follow this religion. Um, in and this is some of the pictures, one of the gods that we celebrate, and this is one of the temples. Although a lot of the religions came from China, starting in like 1945, when the People Republic of China was founded, the governments oversaw all religious practices in China. And right now they managed to recognize 5 religions. However, the authorities still tightly monitor and all of this register and unregistered groups. In the late 1950s, the government starting to have a tightened control and suppress most of the religious practice in China between 1966 and 1976, which is the Cultural Revolution. All forms of religious activities were banned, and the temples and churches were demolished during this time. And I remember it's like a couple years ago or several years ago when I was in doing internship and my last job, they were also a lot of Chinese were doing the asylums application, and a lot of them are applying asylum for freedom of religion because they are the Christians and they cannot really practice in China, so that they apply asylum for protection, and that's one of the reasons. And I know there are other ones that they also seek for asylum, like before there was like one child policy, but it's no longer applicable because China now allows more than 3 kids. So that will not be one of the reasons for asylum. As mentioned before, many of the values in Chinese culture are based upon Confucianism, which stresses like the duty, the loyalty, the honor, filial piety, respect for age and seniority. And these 5 relationships are the building blocks of the social order that ensure harmony in the society, and we are taught to have proper attitudes. So the philosophy says that if the families are in harmony, the society and the governments will also function properly. So family support plays a big role in providing care and even for elder people care in the many Asian society. And the family relationships put an emphasis on hierarchy. So age matters. So I won't be calling my sister or anyone who is older than me by their first name. Even like when I'm texting, I will still call my sister older sister instead of calling her by her first name. And I remember there were times that I have been here long enough, sometimes I would just call my sister her name, and my parents will correct me for not addressing her by her first name, by her older sister. And so it's pretty strict in terms of how you address people. We use horrific terms to address people who are older than you, and also people who you don't know. You will have to like if it's uncle, you will say uncle last name, and you won't be saying the uncle plus their first name. So the family framework in Chinese culture still remain formal and pretty strict in the hierarchical dominance. And so you will also see that a lot of Chinese family, the children still remain in the home. I know it's different from American culture. In our culture, we still, even if you graduated from college, you will still see that they are still remain in the home, staying with their parents. Because they consider that they should be taking care of the parents when they grow up. So the children remain closer to home in their adulthood. And those who are required to work away from home, they tend to make regular visit, like weekly visits to the home. And usually if they have to move out, it's usually when they have family or they have kids and there's not enough space. But other than that, most of the time they will stay in the home with their parents. Generally speaking, Chinese are a collective society with the need for group affiliation, like whether they're with their family, with their children, school, work, and country. So again, in order to maintain this sense of harmony, they will act in peace at all times. They will not do things that can cause other people embarrassment or put other people in the awkward position. So individuals are usually willing to subjugate their own feelings for the good of the group, and they will sacrifice their own well-being for the collective group first. So if you are, like, for example, if you're disagreeing with another person, we don't usually say in public. Usually we remain in silence, and you wouldn't see someone who is disagreeing another person in public. Even you disagree, you will probably say it in private, so that you don't cause other people to lose face. The concept of face, it's very crucial in the culture too. And the way to describe the idea of the face is that it is a prevention of embarrassment at all cost. For example, you will never see a son or daughter to disagree their parents in public. A colleague will not criticize another people in public. A subordinate, the staff will not point out an error made by their superior or their boss. And that all comes from this aspect of face. Someone can lose their face or lose face for others. And so it is not only in Chinese culture, I would say, it's actually in East Asian culture, like in Korea or in Japan. This idea of face is also very crucial. It's the same idea as important, is as important as how American sees the self and independence. So yes, so this is that's why there's a saying that whatever happens in the family stays in the family, because you don't want it to lose face or bring shame to the family or bring your family reputation down, because it's all because of the face. So the next will be the gender. Again, Confucianism plays a big role in subjugation of women who were once seen as the possessions of men, and it is still the case in some of the rural area. They were first seen possessed by men, by their father, and then their husband. And historically, women held in a subordinate role, that even though they have some power within the home, but men are the head of the household. They're the one who makes the ultimate decision. And the role of women began to change during the 20th century. However, because of this strong ideology of Confucianism, which identifies women as weak, it is still prevails in some of the communities. And you see that in the picture, it's a traditional foot binding, which is another symbol of power that men had over women. And this body alteration is still being used by some tribes for a number of reasons. They see that a well-bounded foot meant a greater prospects for a marriage. And in addition to having the tinier the feet looks like, the girl's social stat, the higher the girl's social status is. That's how they determine it. So this practice was not banned until the 20th century. And you will see that usually they started in the younger age, probably around 5 or 6. They start binding their foot so that they can maintain the certain like centimeters of the foot. For the favorism over son, for son over daughter, this happens I think in a lot of Asian culture, but particularly in Chinese culture, there's a deep-seated cultural preference for sons over daughters. And the reason being that it can because of the Chinese was a patriarchic society, and a lot of times they would also need the son, the male, to work in the farm or in agriculture, and while the daughters remain in the home. So they prefer son rather than daughter because of that. They can have more help. They can also bring more financial supports to the home. And in some of religious aspects, the male can continue the family legacy because they carry their last name. So when a daughter married, the daughter will remove from their father's household registry, and they will transfer to their husbands. So that's also a sign that once the daughter is married, they no longer belong to her original family, and so that's why they consider the daughter as someone else. They won't really invest much in daughters because eventually the daughter belongs another family. That's the mentality. So before there's like a sex selections was operated in China between the 1980s and 1990s. During that time, that people will select if they see that ultrasound sees that it's a son, they will keep it. If it's a daughter, they will abort it. But now the law and regulation has forbidden the hospital to do this. They will not allow having a sex selection during the pregnancy. So wedding rituals, it's a very complicated process, and I'm just highlighting a couple of this in the PowerPoints. So this is before the couple get married, they will have this like ceremony, the engagement ceremony. You will have to put down the dowry. The groom will have to prepare gifts, like the grand gifts, like including jewelry or the wine, the dragon and phoenix, like a candle. This is like it's a simplifying wealth and prosperity and good fortunes. And in return, the bride, they will prepare also financial support to like jewelry and financial support to the daughter to bring it on their wedding day. And before they decide to have the wedding date, before they get on the married date, they have to speak to a fortune teller. It's not the wedding day usually not choose randomly. It's actually go by the Chinese lunar calendar. The fortune teller will tell you which dates is better and will have a better success to marriage. And basically, I would say basically every couples will have to go through this. You pick a wedding date that's good fit for both of your zodiac and your partner's zodiac, and then they will make a determination on which day you eventually have your wedding day. And then the timing is also matters. On the day of the wedding, you have to be very precise how many hours you spend in this ceremony, and then moving to the next part, you have to be very specific in terms of the hours that you are going to be at the wedding ceremony. For the tea ceremony, it's very important and imperative tradition, and it still happens now. It is the time that the bride and groom express their respect and gratitude and appreciation to their parents. So both of them will kneel down and bow. Usually it's 3 bows to both parents before they leave for their wedding. There's also a hair combing ceremony. It's a ritual performed the night before the wedding. The couple will enter. It's like a simplifying the couple entering in the new stage of the adulthood. They will be their hair will be tied up as a simplifying of connected and tight and for their next phase of their life. After the ceremony ends, the bride will go back to her original family's home after 3 days of ceremony, and the bride will visit their family with the groom 3 days after. And at this point, she is no longer considered part of the family. And so the bride's family, which is her original family, will have to welcome her with a mini banquet or like a mini ceremony of her coming back. So this is like a more common practice even still today, and more important ones that happening in the wedding ritual. And I know it's very complicated and I wouldn't go into detail of that. So for the funeral rituals, we pay a very high respect to elders in our society, even those who are deceased. So if for the funeral for an elder, it must be carried out completely, including that you have to prepare a funeral even before the death. Like for example, a person is already on their or the hospice or in the deathbed, you will start planning and you order a casket, and you will also make sure you will have to find out if the patient wants, I mean, your elders want to be in a home or in a hospital. That has to be planned accordingly. The certain preparation for funeral must be made in the home, like you have to remove all the mirrors from the site, because we believe that if you see a coffin in a mirror, you will have a death within your own family soon. And during the funeral, you don't say, if someone go to pay respect at the funeral, you after you finish and you leave, you don't say goodbye. You don't say goodbye to them because no one wants to see each other at the funeral again. So you just leave quietly after you pay respect. You just go. Usually, the family who have the funeral will wear in white color, and they will have to put the banners, the white banners, all over the door so that the neighbors, they all know there's a death in the family and there's a funeral happening. The monk will come. The monk will have a vigil. In both Buddhism and Taoism, they will have a monk keep the vigil over the deceased during the wake. They will chant the verses of scripts for the deceased in order to help them ease their journey into their afterlife. There will be songs, music, and flutes and trumpets played during the wake. During the funeral, we don't, so someone who just recently got married or they're pregnant or if they're engaged, they're not supposed to go to funeral or pay respect. They are not supposed to go there. They consider it will bring misfortunes to the newlywed or to the baby, so that usually it's not recommended. And before leaving the funeral home, some of the Chinese family will leave with the water infused with pomegranate to protect you from the evil spirits following you home. So there's some of the funeral rituals that we practice. Feng Shui, maybe some of you have heard this before. It means the way of wind and water. And the philosophy of Feng Shui is usually practiced of arranging the pieces in the living space in order to create balance within the natural world. And it's a method of balancing yin and yang. So we actually have Feng Shui basically everything too. When we move into a new apartment or new home, we will have a Feng Shui master come and see, and they will also let us know which direction you have to put what furniture, if you need to put the plants or put a water, that you also water, like a mini water fountain or some crystal in the home, so that it will bring luck and prosperity. So those are usually practiced regularly even to today. Social custom and manners. Greetings are formal usually, and we start with the oldest person. We always greet the oldest person first. If we sit in the big table, the oldest person will sit first, and they usually sit in the middle or the main seat. As mentioned earlier, we address by their honorific title and their surname, last name. When we are doing the toasting, if we're having a toast, the younger person are supposed to lower their glasses than the older person, and they tend to be the one who have to be serving like pour water or serving food. So that's the younger person's responsibility. Having eye contacts or looking into one's eyes are considered disrespectful, and having a prolonged eye contact can also be seen as confrontational. So when I was growing up, I don't look at the teacher or my parents' eyes when they're talking to you. Technically, you have to look down and not showing that you are listening. So anyone who's in a higher position or higher regard, you don't make eye contact like your boss or doctor. They don't directly look into your eyes. It's not that they're not listening. It's just culturally, we weren't taught to look into people's eyes. If you're invited to a Chinese household, you are expected to remove your shoes before entering the house. Usually the host will prepare a slipper, but you are not supposed to wear your outside shoes to the inside the home. Touching is only acceptable between family and close friends. We are not really a touching culture, so that's usually only handshakes, but that's pretty much it. We're Chinese culture is very respectful of time. If you tell them that it's 5 o'clock, technically a person will arrive 4:50 or 4:20. They try to be very respectful so that you don't let other people wait for you. Again, it's idea of collectivism. You don't want to make other people uncomfortable or bring other people inconvenience. So that's also social manners. In terms of care, it is important to understand that the basic methods of the traditional Chinese medicine, because a lot of Chinese patients may treat a condition with the traditional Chinese medicine before seeking a regular doctor at the clinic or the hospital. And so when you see the patients, Chinese patients, some of them may be reluctant to share that they are seeing someone or traditional Chinese medicine therapist, because they are fearing that American clinician would disapprove it. But for us, some of the chronic illness like arthritis or digestive issues, usually in our culture, we are treated with traditional Chinese medicine because it's mainly guided by like a holistic concept of health, and they emphasize on achieving balance and harmony within the body system. So they won't go too aggressive first with the Western medicine for the chronic illness. But they're pretty open in terms of emergency care or such as like cancer, stroke, or surgery. They will seek help from the Western modern medicine. But again, like chronic illness, they tend to seek for Chinese like herb treatment first. Doctor is seen as authority figure. So in our culture, in Chinese culture, doctors are seen as very trustworthy, and oftentimes doctors' opinion are considered the most important. And so because we consider that they are very highly intelligent, principled, moral, and possessing special knowledge, so some of the elders may even listen to the doctors more than their own children. So it's therefore a lot of times you may come across the children will tell the doctor, oh, can you just tell my parents to do this, that, because they listen to you more than I do. So that's because of they see the doctor as with a high regard. We again respect for elders, filial piety, which is xiao. It's a very important concept. There's a moral duty for the children to care for their parents. In fact, in China and in Taiwan, we have this criminal law where if the children are not caring for their parents who are unable to care for themselves or do not have the capacity to care for themselves, they will get sued and they will be sentenced for sentenced to jail for, I think depends, usually start with 5 months to 6 months to 5 years of prison time. So that's also one of the reason a lot of it feels like the moral duty you have to care, even though a lot of them may feel that the other responsibility also burdening them, but they still have to take on this moral duty, and they won't place their family to a nursing home. Again, that people talk. So if you put your mom in nursing home, you also consider like lose face. People will say that you don't care for your parents and it doesn't look good to your family. So you want to save face. So emotional harmony is a major component for Eastern attitudes. And so discussing death can be seen as a topic that will interfere inner harmony. It's quite challenging to discuss anything related to like healthcare proxy or living will. And for me, to be honest, it's hard for me to talk about it to my parents too. It's something that's you have to approach sensitively and subtly without really harming their feeling. They will think that why would you start talking about this? I'm not even that old. So the next will be the fatalism. Many life events in Chinese culture are considered as unpredictable, and they will think that it's predetermined by destiny, and they won't really like do much about it. So the idea of like preventive care is not really in the culture. Like for example, right now over 80 or over 6 years old, we have like regular routine checkup. In our culture, that's not something they will do regularly. They will only go to the doctor when there's something wrong with them. They won't go even for the preventive care. Advanced care planning. So there is an agreement to talk, even though sometimes the family will try to talk about it, but it is still a taboo and it's disrespectful. Again, as I mentioned, it's something that you wanted to approach carefully. Some of the children may not want it to discuss because they would think that advanced care planning is something they would only do after they get the diagnosis. It's not something that they would do before the crisis. And if like caregiving, the idea of dying peacefully in the home, it's important to Chinese people. They feel that they wanted to die in their own home where they belong to. It's important to them. And removing, because of the filial duty and filial piety, it's important to some of the family to remove life support from their loved ones or their parents. It's something they will have struggled with. And I think when we are handling a situation like this, we should also be mindful and considerate where this coming from. Hospice is a novel idea. It's not something that's common in our culture. So when you are approaching this topic, you can provide more information and allow time for them to consider. So some of the suggestion is that, as I mentioned, when you are seeing a Asian patient or Chinese patient, you want to establish your authority and resume your professional roles because they look high regard in your position. Like they will see that the doctor is someone they can trust and they will follow order. And you want to check their understanding if they're actually listening. And as I mentioned, sometimes they won't look at you in your eyes, not because they are not listening. It's just by culture, they usually don't look at the person who with a higher power in their eyes. So you want to make sure they're listening. Then you can check a couple more times and then be patient with them, allow periods of silence and reflection of what's being said. And provide clear and full information in terms of what to expect. And definitely it will be helpful if you have information in their language so that they will have better understanding and be attentive to their nonverbal cues. So a lot of times, again, that also comes from the culture, like they will say that, oh, I don't have any questions. Sometimes it's not because they don't have It just they don't want to bring inconvenience to the doctor. They will be like, oh, because your time is precious, so there's no other questions, and they would just move forward. But so if it will be helpful to check with them a few times, and then be attentive to their nonverbal cues. I think that's pretty much it. I sort of just quickly went through it. Any questions?